high school career, Mr. Falco and Mr. Ballard. They were both goofy. One of them was a part-time pastor, part-time teacher. And I don't remember anything from their class, but I just remember them always making me feel like I was important to them. And that's important. That comes out of a sense of story, because story connects people. If you're new to Forward Point, we've been in the middle of the series we're wrapping up today called Love Your Neighbor, and we've been going through this blessed strategy. The reality is you and I have been blessed, but we're not just blessed to be able to enjoy and think of ourselves as God's favorite, even though you are God's favorite. It's a strategy that we've been blessed, a calling we've been blessed to bless others. And it starts with the B, and it's this idea that we begin with prayer. In this wanting to love our neighbors and wanting to help them to come into closer proximity to Jesus and a relationship with Jesus, first off, we always want to begin with prayer. Not so much because we're asking God to do some kind of dramatic, miraculous thing in their life where they have this, midnight conversion through a dream. Maybe that happens. But through beginning with prayer, something happens inside of us where we begin to change. Our hearts begin to change, and we become more aware of the people around us throughout the day to start talking to them, to build relationship with them, to continue on with this blessed strategy. The next thing is we want to set up ourselves to listen to our neighbors, to our coworkers, to our classmates, right? How do we set ourselves up to listen? Because listening is a lot more than just hearing. It's a lot more than just kind of being present and allowing the words to go in one ear and out the other ear. It's about making sure that they know you're seeking to understand the heart behind what it is that they're saying. The underlying things that they're trying to say. We want to be good listeners. The next part is we want to eat, right? Who doesn't want to eat? But we saw that, there's something mysterious that happens around the dinner table. There's something mysterious that happens when we set ourselves up in circles around food, where people are, their guards are down, and they begin to share about life. Sometimes the awkwardness of the silence can kind of be hidden underneath we're chewing and our food, right? And it creates this real inviting atmosphere where relationship begins to build. This is something that we try to do in our life group. A lot of the life groups all have food around them because there's something mysterious. They can't really explain it. But when you look all throughout the Bible, there's this theme of food always being involved in these important situations. So we want to be good eaters. Some of us a little better eaters than others, but you skinny people have some work to do. We have eat, serve. We want to be people who serve. Right? And there's different kinds of serving, but we want to be people who, when it comes to serving, it's more like being a slave than being a hero. And in our culture, we like to do things because it's going to get posted about, it's going to be retweeted or reshared, or it's going to be on the news. But the idea that we see when it comes to serving is that it's really a lot more like being a slave, where we submit ourselves to the fact that we're going to do whatever it takes, we're going to sacrifice whatever we have to for the sake of showing somebody that we care about them, that we value them more than we even value our own life. And that's when people start to feel the love and start to step towards a relationship with Jesus. So we have these cards in the back. I would encourage you to pick them up, the Who is My Neighbor card. And this is just a simple tool for you to begin to write the names of people who are maybe your neighbors, maybe your coworkers, but people who you are in close proximity with, maybe your classmates, the locker next to you, that you just begin to write their names and you go through this blessed strategy. You're going to begin to pray for them and pray that God help me use this blessed strategy to show them that I love them. God, help me use this blessed strategy to show my coworkers that I love them. And in that, they may experience the love of Jesus. And today we get to wrap things up in this blessed strategy with this idea of story. How do we share our story? Right? How do we get to a place in someone's life where they want to hear our story? They want to hear about how we got to where we are. That at some point they would say, man, all the things that you've done to reach out to me, to develop this relationship, all of these things, and now I see your life, and there's just something, how did you get to where you are? And when we look at the scriptures, when we look at Jesus' life, man, Jesus was great at telling stories. In fact, you look through most of his words, and it was some kind of story that he was telling, either a parable or it was a narrative of what Jesus was actually doing. And we recognize that you and I have a story, and our stories are part of a much larger story that he's trying to tell. And it's a story about helping people find their purpose. And that's really the heart behind how do we love our neighbor. Because we want them to find their purpose. We believe that everybody has a purpose, and that purpose is a relationship with Jesus, which everything else in life flows out of. So how do we do that? For some of us, it's very scary, the thought of telling our story for all sorts of different reasons. But when we look at Jesus, and there's this very specific story that we're going to look at today, we see how one man got the opportunity based on his encounter with Jesus to share his story. It didn't necessarily lead to all sorts of conversions and fanfare, and that's not the point. The point of sharing our story is because God is doing something in your life. He's doing something in my life. And we want to be people and loving our neighbor who are free and comfortable with sharing our story. So the background here is Jesus is traveling, and there's this blind man who can't see, obviously. And Jesus goes to help him. But when it comes to sharing our story, forward point, here's the reality. Story is not about information, but about transformation. That's what you're going to find. Whenever you hear somebody's story, whenever you connect with somebody's story, there's a part of you that changes. There's a part of you that bends towards that person as they are open and vulnerable. When you begin to realize that something about them, it almost relates to something about you, and there's this connection that happens. That's really what happens when we give our lives to Jesus. When we realize, man, Jesus, who knows everything about us, all the things that we've done, the things that nobody else knows, would still choose to love us. And then there's this connection that happens as our story becomes safe to share with him, and he accepts us. And the same thing happens with each other when we share our story. It's a very loving and personal thing to do, to share your story, not just the high points, not just the things that we think everybody's going to like and appreciate and make it look like we all have it together. No. But the real parts of your story, right? The struggles, the hurts, the pains, the places where it didn't look so pretty, where it wasn't just a pretty bow on top. It's in those moments, it's when you share those things, right, with your BFFs, or maybe even someone who's not a BFF yet. But after that, they become someone who you value and you seek out now because you recognize they're not judging you for what you told them. In fact, they seem to love you even more because of that, because you shared your story. So Jesus, in John chapter 9, if you have your Bibles, starting with verse 1, it says, walking down the street, Jesus saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or the parents, causing him to be born blind? What the disciples had here was this theology that anything bad in the world happened as a result of somebody's sin. Like there was a direct correlation between the bad in the world and somebody doing something. And they said, for this man who's been born blind, was it his sin or the parents' sin? And I find it kind of strange, right? It's kind of silly. Like, how could a newborn baby have sinned to cause his own blindness, right? Like, was he kicking too hard in the womb or caused his mom some indigestion? Like, I don't understand what he could have done as an infant to have sinned to cause himself to be blind. And it kind of seems a little silly, right? But the disciples, what did they want? The disciples wanted information. The disciples wanted a formula. They wanted to be able to nail down X plus B equals C, right? They wanted to have the formula that was going to tell them and give them the knowledge to what causes the bad things in the world to happen. But that's not how it works. And if anybody should know, it should be them, right? Them as the disciples, sinners, they didn't get to be a part of the normal disciple process and go to school and come under a normal rabbi. They were all dropouts. They were failures. They couldn't hack it in school, so they had to go and do other things, like become fishermen. So if anybody knew anything about sinning, it was these guys, but they still wanted to use information to deflect off themselves to be able to have the same power that the religious leaders had. To be able to point at someone in their affliction or their hurt and their pain and to say, man, it's a result of your sin that this is happening, or it's a result of someone else's sin that this is happening. And that's not the case. And in fact, Jesus uses this as a teaching moment. He says, you're asking the wrong question here, guys. You're looking for someone to blame. There's no such cause effect here. Look instead for what God can do. Right? Jesus tells them, guys, you're asking closed questions, right? If you want to get to somebody's story, you have to ask open-ended questions. If you've ever been in sales, they teach you how to ask open-ended questions. Closed questions are questions that you can respond to with a yes or a no, or just a specific word is the answer. But open-ended questions are questions that require you to say more than just a yes or a no or a single word answer. Right? They're designed to help make sure that you understand the information that you're hearing, or to kind of dig deeper to what's going on in your life and in your mind. And Jesus says you're asking the wrong questions. You're asking closed-end questions. It's not just the parent's sin or the young man's sin when he was born. But there's a deeper question to ask. It's not just about information. It's about transformation. It's about this being an opportunity that even in the midst of something as sad as being blind for all of your life, that God can do something. That God can use this story as a process for transformation. And Jesus could have left it there. He could have just kind of called them out and said, you know what, you guys are asking the wrong questions. You should have had a V8, right? Nope. But he didn't leave it there. He says, you know what, this is going to be a great teaching lesson. No, it wasn't about the information. He invites them into a story with front row seats to participate in what's going to happen. And this is what he does. He said this, and then he spit in the dust and made a clay paste with the saliva. Rubbed the paste on the blind man's eyes and said, go wash at the pool of Siloam, which means sent. And the man went and washed and saw. Man, this is, imagine having front row seats to seeing something like this. Now, this is a pretty popular story because of how gross it is, right? Let's be honest. Nobody wants, any germaphobes in here? Any people who, like, if this is the way to get your sight, you wouldn't be seeing right now because you're too afraid of right? This is kind of yucky. This isn't even the worst of it. There's a little lesser known story, probably because it's even grosser, found in Mark chapter 7. It says this, is a man who was deaf and mute. He took the man by himself. Look, this is Jesus. He put his fingers in the man's ears, right? Like this. And some spit on the man's tongue. Yeah, we're not memorizing that in school these days, right? This verse. And then Jesus looked up in prayer. It kind of reminds me of like the Three Stooges. It's like this is where they got, the spit in the guys. But then Jesus looked up in prayer and groaned mightily and commanded, Epiphath, open up. And it happened. And the man's hearing was clear and his speech plain, just like that, right? Jesus didn't have to do it this way. Right, there is. I don't want you guys to go home and try this on your sick friends, okay? Because that might be too much too soon. He didn't have to do, but it's not about the formula. It's not about the process. Jesus wasn't offering a playbook to follow for a play-by-play. This is what you're going to do, rinse and repeat. But he was inviting them into a story almost so kind of crazy, right? That to truly follow him, it would require a laying down of your guard. Because if any of us are alive in here, we know stories are messy. There's a good chance your story is messy. I know my story is messy. Sure, when we get together for, talking out in the foyer and just hanging out, it's all about the good things that are happening and how, fun in the world is. But that's really just a small part of a really messy story that you and I have. One that probably doesn't get told that often, but Jesus made it a point to make sure that, we're going to have the messy in big, bold letters for all of eternity, because it's not about information. It's not about how many verses you can have memorized. It's not about having the right words in a prayer. It's not about doing the right, laying on of hands or fingers the right way. It's about transformation that happens when our stories come together. So after the man begins to see from this saliva paste mud, soon the town was buzzing, right? The story starts to spread. His relatives and those who year after year had seen him as a blind man begging were saying, "Why, isn't this the man we knew who sat here and begged?" Right? It's obvious to everyone in that community that this man already had a story. He had a BC story, right? A before Christ story. You and I, we have a BC story, hopefully. Maybe for some of you this morning, all you have is a story, and you've not yet come into a relationship with Jesus. That's okay. We're glad that you're here, and we pray that at some point you would have a BC story. But for most of us here this morning, we probably have a BC story, what our life was like before Christ. And for this community, this man had a BC story, and all it was that he was blind and a beggar. Very low in the totem pole, socially, economically. And this is where he is. And his BC story is not a pretty one. It's a messy one. But something about the change that happened in his life piqued their curiosity, and this is what happened. They said, "How did your eyes get opened?" Right? Is this an open-ended question or a closed question? Right? This is an open-ended question. All of a sudden, this blind man has got all the attention of everybody there, and he can tell them whatever he wants to. He can share about everything that ever has happened to him. Because the transformation that Jesus initiated in his life was so big, so powerful, and he was open about it. It was so public that they couldn't help but say, "Man, tell us the story. Tell us how it happened. How did you go from being blind all of your life to now being able to see?" Because story, it draws out those right kind of questions. When you begin to go through this process, this blessed strategy with your friends and your coworkers, it's a lot of investment. It's a lot of work to just listen and to just pray and to just eat. But it's so that you get to this point in this relationship where they begin to say, "Hey, tell me about your story. Tell me how you went from this place in your life to now where you are today." It was an invitation. It was an invitation to share about Jesus. And I only wish that we as followers of Christ desired to have people invite us into their life. In our culture, Christians are pretty good at being known for just interrupting and just kind of throwing our stories into people's lives. Right? That's why we get the reputation for being judgmental and mean and the last place that people want to be, because we're constantly just pointing our fingers at other people's stories and calling out other people's junk. But what we see here is an example of what it looks like to be invited into share your story. To have developed that kind of relationship with somebody where they are asking for your story. And he tells them, he says, "A man named Jesus, I don't even know him. Like, I've met him, but I don't even know what he looks like because I was blind when I met him. A man named Jesus, I couldn't tell you who he was. I wouldn't be able to pull him out in a lineup because I don't know what he looks like. But a man named Jesus, he made paste. I wonder if nobody told him what the paste was made out of. Because he just said, a paste. All I know is that there was some mud on my face. and rubbed it on my eyes and told me, go to Siloam and wash. I did what he said. And when I washed, I saw. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, guys. All my life, I've been this way. All my life, I've struggled with this thing. All my life. But now, because of Jesus, my life is like this. And, I don't know all the answers. I don't even know the formula ratio of the paste, the saliva to mud. I don't know what it is. But what I can tell you is that my life was like this, and now my life is like this. That's my story. And I'm sticking to it. You see, in our information world, many of us say, I could never share my faith with somebody. Right? Because I don't know enough. I don't know the right verses. I don't know enough of the right answers, the apologetics. I don't know the answers to people's doubts and people's questions. So I could never have a conversation with somebody. And throughout Jesus' life here, we don't see a Savior who's just looking to pick conversations to win with people. He's not just looking for opportunities to dispense information into people. But over and over again, what we do see is someone who enters into other people's stories and he transforms their life. And I think, man, if we could only get close to being known for that in other people's lives. But we don't, because we have our lives changed. We have our BC story. And then we just kind of go on living our own life for ourselves. But what if, Forward Point, we decided, you know what? We are going to not just be blessed so we can get to heaven someday. But we're going to choose to be blessed, to be a blessing to others. And we're going to earn the right in other people's lives to have them ask us, hey, tell me about how this happened in your life. And we're going to be open and honest and vulnerable to share the messy part as well as the good parts. And just simple, it's just, this is what my life was like before. And now this is what my life is like now. And it's something any of us can do if we're intentional to do it. And that's what he did. And as a result, what they did is they marched him right from there because Jesus had done this on the Sabbath. And if you're familiar with the religious culture in that day, man, you did not do anything on the Sabbath. Between a man being healed and someone doing something on the Sabbath, they'd rather pay attention to the fact that he did something on the Sabbath. So they marched this guy to the religious leaders, and they go back and forth arguing about how this happened. Is Jesus who he says he is? So they called the man back a second time, the man who had been blind, and told him, give credit to God. All right, this is like saying, swear on the Holy Bible. We know this man is an imposter, speaking of Jesus. And the now seeing man replied, he says, I know nothing about whether Jesus is an imposter, and I know nothing one way or another about that. But what I do know for sure is I was blind, and now I see. He gives his story again. This is the abridged version, obviously, but it's very basic. Basic for you as well. It doesn't have to be long and drawn out in 30 minutes, but just, this is what my life was like before. I was blind. This is what he did to me, and now I see. This is my story. I can't speak to your facts, right? Your information, the things that you want to be able to use to build a case against Jesus. Like, I don't know about that. But let me tell you my story. I was like this, but now I'm like this. And as a result, the religious leaders, they ridicule him, make fun of him, and they throw him out. And that tends to be more accurate to how we act as Christians. We don't get what we want. We kind of take pride in maybe being thrown out and being ridiculed for our faith, when the reality is we just have done nothing to earn the right to speak into people's lives. There's people with bullhorns and sandwich board signs, and they'll go to places where there's people who they don't agree with and preach against him. But what this blessed strategy tells us, right? There's 4 parts of this blessed strategy that we invest in, that we do day after day after day after day for who knows how long. We heard last week from Judy's story. It was years before she was sitting bedside with that man on his deathbed, and then his wife. Right? Years of investment, years of just over and over. God, would you help me be alert? Would you help me be on guard for how I can listen to who's ever on my card? Would you help me be creating environments where I can invite them for dinner, or I can invite myself over for dinner and just eat? Weeks, years and years of just serving, just doing small little things, maybe mowing their lawn or shoveling their driveway, but just the investment to get to that place where we're finally able to share our story. There's so much investment that takes place that unfortunately, Ford Point, we never get close to, because we just think it's going to be these dramatic events with instantaneous results. But there's something to this blessed strategy that requires us to get to this place. There's a whole lot that happens to get to this place where we can finally share our story. You know what, neighbor, my life was like this. You know, it's not all roses and dandelions now, but now this is what my life is like. And I've never been more sure, I've never been more confident. I don't know all the answers, to be truthfully with you. There's probably a lot more that I don't know than I do know. But what is inarguable, what is undeniable, is that this was what my life was like, and now this is what my life was like. And even though some of the bad stuff is still there, some of the maybe the sickness or some of the broken relationships, some of those things are still there, there is a peace, there's a comfort. There's something that I found in this relationship with Jesus that, you know what, I would never want to go back to my BC story. So this morning, it's really just in preparing for the time, right? We're supposed to always be prepared to give a reason, to give an explanation. How much do you know, have you even thought about your story, right? Just begins with first, what is your BC story, right? For some of you may think, Jimmy, I don't have a BC story. I grew up in the church. My parents are Christians. As far back as I can remember, I've just been going to church. But a BC story, a relationship with Jesus, following him, is so much more than just having gone to church your entire life. Right, following Jesus, a relationship with Jesus doesn't get stronger, doesn't get better based on how many times you've been to church on a Sunday or a Wednesday or a Friday or any other day of the week. But your relationship with Jesus grows, you become more like him based on decisions you make, based on aligning your life to his design. So even if you grew up in church, like me, I grew up in church, but I can remember the time when I said, man, this faith thing is becoming real to me. This is something I want to do on my own, not because my parents tell me I have to, not because, man, when I was in Sunday school, if I raised my hand, I would get the little, gift from the teachers because I accepted Jesus into my heart. I got a lot of those. But it's because of a decision that I'm making. So what is your BC story? And maybe this morning is an opportunity where your BC story is, man, I just was kind of riding on the faith of my parents or on my siblings, or riding on the faith of my pastor or my life group leader, and I never really for myself. And maybe for this morning, your BC story starts today. As of today, you might have one because you're making the decision. But what is your BC story? And then the next part is real simple. It's just, how did it become your BC story? What were the things involved that brought you to a point to realize that, you know what, I need to change the direction of my life, right? I was headed one way, and I decided I'm going to turn the other way and start going towards the higher ways that Jesus has for me. How did that happen? It could have been a Sunday morning gathering like we have here. It could have been some kind of event that you went to. It could have just been that you were sitting in your bed reading, and for the first time the words came alive to you. The beauty of our stories is that they're not the same. But what is it for you? What were the elements involved where the Spirit was working, where you became alive to the fact that you needed Jesus in your life for yourself? How did it become your BC story? And then lastly, how is your life different now than from your BC story? And this is where we get real tempted. We get really tempted to say, man, now my life is all hunky-dory. Now my life, everything's perfect, and follow Jesus like I do because everything is just going to align up and be beautiful. And that's not reality, right? That isn't what is different from our BC story to today. What is different is that we've made a decision. And now there's a peace. Now there's a presence. Now there's something going on inside of me. We're in the midst of all of that bad stuff, in the midst of all the crap, in the midst of all the messiness. I know that I'm not alone. I know that there's a purpose and a plan that I didn't have before. How is your life different now than from your BC story? Just 3 simple aspects that I'll encourage you just to talk through with yourself. So that when the time comes, if you say, man, I'm going to commit to praying for my neighbors, praying for my coworkers, praying for my classmates, man, I'm committed to listen. I'm committed to eat. I'm committed to serve. I guarantee you there is going to come a time when you're going to have an opportunity to just share your story. This last week, I was taking Ishi to a doctor's appointment, and it was a neurological exam, so the doctor was doing all sorts of these weird things with him and have him doing all sorts of things, and we got to talking, and she asked if you had any other kids, and I said, we have 4 girls, and she's like, 4 biological girls? And I said, yeah. She's like, why would you have so many kids, right? I get that question a lot. But what was that question? It was an open-ended question. And now all of a sudden I had this opportunity to tell this doctor, man, you know what? We just value life so much. You know, we are pro-life. But for us, being pro-life is more than just abortion. For us, it's womb to tomb. And we feel that it's our calling. We have the ability. We have the heart. We have kids who are on board. So we said, we're going to do whatever we can to be a fighter for life. And I got to share that story with this doctor because I was ready, because I had thought through the process. So 4-point story, when you begin to be brave enough, when you begin to be open enough to share your story, you can practice with some of the people in this room. I would encourage you to. But when I look back over my years of ministry, specifically in youth ministry, man, there's this one activity that I'll say has probably been the most powerful thing that I've ever seen. I've got to experience it a couple times where in these group settings, they would have people stand on, the youth divided and have them stand on opposite ends of the room. And they would begin to just ask questions about if you've ever experienced, and they just would start off real simple and real generic, right? If you've ever experienced a Hallmark movie, we'll say, right? Step forward. And they step to the middle of the room, and people kind of look around to see the other people who have seen the Hallmark movies, and then they go back. And they start off just real basic and real simple, right? Who's ever had a McDonald's Happy Meal, right? And people step to the middle and look around and giggle, and we've had too many, right? And they walk back and go back. And then gradually, it's who's ever experienced abuse? And it's kind of hesitant at first, and No one's real sure what they should do, but one brave person kind of takes the first step. And then gradually a few other people begin to step with them. And all of a sudden in the middle, there's a bunch of people who look around and realize that they're not alone. Realize that there's other people in close proximity to them who are dealing with the same things that they've done, things that they've never told anybody before. But now there's this connection. Now there's this relationship that's been built because of a messy, ugly part of their life that they thought they had to keep hidden. They could share, and they would go back. And it was who's ever experienced divorce. And again, more people would come to the middle and look around and realize that they're not the only ones, that they're not just broken human beings, that their story, when shared, unites. When their story, when shared, it leads to transformation. It began to give other people the opportunity to, at first, they weren't going to step forward because they didn't want anybody to know. But one person said, I'm going to share this part of my story. And it gave someone else the power to then share their story. And it led to transformation. I believe, Forward Point, if you would be available to share your story, to be ready to share your story, that when that open-ended question comes, because you're so just filled up with purpose, because you're praying and you're listening and you're eating and you're serving and you're all on guard. We're just waiting for that. Hey, how did you get to the place where you're at today? How did you have your eyes opened? How did you go through the abuse? How did you go through the divorce and still not want to end your life or hurt yourself? Or maybe you did hurt yourself because of that. How did you stop? Or maybe you haven't even stopped yet, but maybe there's a desire to want to stop. And how did you get there? And that's the power of story. So what's your story? And are you ready to share it? God, we are so grateful that you are the author of this beautiful story. That what would seem at first glance to just be a sad state for humanity as we entered and chose our own way, and sin entered the world, and death and destruction, God, that we would just think it'd be so easy for you just to rip up the pages and start over. It'd be so easy for you just to leave us and kind of just wandering on our own, but instead you chose to enter into the story, to move into the neighborhood, to share your life with us. God, we come before you this morning so sorry for the amount of time in our life where we just have lived it for ourselves. God, would you help us maybe this morning to get to our BC moment? That maybe for some of us, today is the day where we say that, man, up to this point, my life has just been lived for me. My life has just kind of been going through emotions. My life has just been a series of making it seem like I have it all together. But this morning, maybe I'm going to be the one to take a step forward, a step into the middle of the room and say, you know what, I'm doing this because I want to do it. Because I believe that Jesus created me on purpose for a purpose. And I know it's not going to fix everything. I know not everything's just going to line up, but I'm going to turn and I'm going to walk towards his higher ways for my life and realize that, I'm not going to be alone. And in that, man, God, I just cannot wait to see the beauty that begins to grow from that, the life that begins to sprout up from that as different people just stories intersect and relationships are made stronger and deeper. God, that people are brought into closer relation, brought into faith with you as a result of the stories that are going to be shared this afternoon, this evening, and weeks from now, and months from now, and maybe even years from now, as we just have continued to just, how can I be a blessing? I'm blessed to be a blessing. How can I be a blessing? And we get to share our stories. Thank you for making something of our stories, for using the mess, for using the ugliness, for using the things that we think we should hide and keep buried, that you take those very things, these foolish things of the world, to confound the wise. So God, help us as we respond to you this morning through these songs. God, help us to walk out as your little storytellers.
of our dear Savior's birth. Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, when wonder breaks a new and glorious morn. Fall on your knees, oh, hear the angel voices, oh, night divine, oh, night divine, oh, night divine, oh, night divine. Truly he taught us to love one another. His law is love, and his gospel is peace. Chains he shall break, for the slave is our brother, and in his name all oppression shall cease. Let's praise his holy name. Fall on your knees, oh, hear the angel voices, oh, night divine, oh, night when Christ was born. Oh, night divine, oh, night divine. Christ is the Lord. Oh, praise his name forever. His power and glory, evermore proclaim. His power and glory, evermore proclaim.
The herald angels sing glory to the newborn King. Peace on earth and mercy mild, God and sinners reconciled. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4. Joyful all ye nations rise, join the triumph of the skies. With angelic hosts proclaim, Christ is born in Bethlehem. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Hail the heaven, hail the heaven-born Prince of Peace. Hail, Son of Righteousness, light and life to all he breathes. Risen with healing in his wings. Mount he lays, and mount he lays his glories by. Born that man no more may die. Born to raise the sons of earth. Born to give him second birth. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. King of heaven, come down. King of heaven, come now. Let your glory reign, shining like the day. King of heaven, come. King of heaven, rise up. Who can stand against us? You are strong to save in your mighty name. King of heaven, come. Christ by highest, Christ by highest, even adored. Christ the everlasting Lord. Late in time, behold him come, offspring of the virgin's womb. Mount he lays, and mount he lays his glories by. Born that man no more may die. Born to raise the sons of earth. Born to give him second birth. Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. King of heaven, come down. King of heaven, come now. Let your glory reign, shining like the day. King of heaven, come. King of heaven, rise up. Who could stand against us? You are strong to save in your mighty name. King of heaven, come. Let's sing that again. King of heaven, come now. King of heaven, come now. Let your glory reign, shining like the day. King of heaven, come. King of heaven, rise up. Who can stand against us? You are strong to save in your mighty name. King of heaven, come. King of heaven, come. Oh, King of heaven, come. King of heaven, come. King of heaven, come. King of heaven, come. Oh, King of heaven, come. Oh, King of heaven, come. Oh, King of heaven, come.
Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born. Well, shepherds kept their watching, o'er hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born. Down in the lowly manger, the humble Christ was born. God sent our salvation that blessed Christmas morn. Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is. Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born.
We want to thank everyone again for joining us this morning. If you haven't already, please get connected with us either by texting the word welcome to 315-883-2213 or downloading that Church Center app, which is a great way to get connected.
Also, there is the Bless app, what we've been using this month in our series of Bless strategy. Comes from this app. It keeps track. It sends you emails on who to pray for, what to pray for. It even gives you a prayer. If you have an Apple phone, you can get it on a web browser. If you have it on another type of phone, you have the App Store. Or get the cards we have at the Welcome Center. Those are great too. You can write down who's close to you. Really, anyone. It doesn't have to exactly be the house next door to you. That's a great way to get connected with your community, get connected with people around you, and pray for them.
Again, we want to invite you, your family, and friends this Tuesday, Christmas Eve, 6 o'clock. We are going to be here for a special service, a special message. So please join us. We're going to send us out into the community to pass out donuts after. And it's just a great time to invite people in an extra special day.
And please, if you have something on your heart, please don't leave here without getting prayer. We have a prayer corner right back there. It's all completely confidential. No one will know who you are. It's really just, we want you to feel that you're known, and we want you to receive that prayer.
Yes, and again, if this is your home community, if you like what we do here, we invite you to give, to consider us for those end of year givings. Giving is such a joy, so we have several ways to do it with our Joy Box in the back on our new updated website, through the Church Center app. Just if you want to touch families here in the community and help us do that, we appreciate it.
And then also, if you have a few extra minutes after the gathering, we'd like to ask if you can help us clean up. There'll be a closet in the foyer handing out brooms. Many hands make a light work, and this place is so generous to let us be here every Sunday morning, and we'd like to give back, leave it better than we found it.
And lastly, if you have children upstairs, don't forget
Please
them when
get
you
them.
leave. Thank you so much.
Have a great one.
Have a great week, everyone. In the meantime, go tell it on the mountain.
Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and